Karl Bernhard, welcome to Beyond Human Condition.
Thank you.
You finally made it to the podcast.
I'm here.
Yes.
Humbled to be here. Thank you.
So why don't we start by getting an idea of who you are and where you come from and the whole deal.
Okay. Well, that sounds good. I was born in New Orleans, Louisiana, which is to me, a magical place. It's a place that is built on unstable ground. Essentially, it's a swampland. It's also a location, it's an important location in relation to the United States because it's sort of a big port city. It also has a lot of oil and gas industry, which has been very important. It's one of the largest producers. But as far as the New Orleans itself, so it's on a swampland, and it's also below sea level. So that in itself is kind of an interesting environment to grow up in. It's a volatile environment in that very stricken with hurricanes. You know, growing up, we get quite a lot of them. We experience a lot of flooding. I come from a family of immigrants. My mother and father they were born in Honduras, and before that, their parents came from all over. My father's father is German, and his mother's Honduran or Latin American. My mother's parents are from the Middle East. My mother's father is from Bethlehem, and my grandmother is from Lebanon, a city called Bazbina, just north of Beirut. So I'm first generation American, and I've got two brothers, an older and a younger brother, who've been very important influences in my life, and they still are. I'm married. I have a wife and a son. My son's 10 years old, and we have moved to Florida. We've been here for 10 years now. People had told me that, Sarasota's you need to check that place out, as an architect. And they were right. This place is just rich with good architecture. They call it tropical modern, which is sort of an adaptation of modern architecture that it takes heavy consideration of the climate. Mm-hmm. And that creates very interesting architecture to me and to a lot of people.
What can you tell us about your work right now here in Sarasota?
Sure. Well, I think I find it interesting that when I was practicing architecture in New Orleans, I practiced there for 10 years. I studied there. And I had mentioned, the environment there is a bit volatile, and building there can be very tricky, thinking about flooding and hurricanes. It's really no different here in Sarasota. I work with Sweet Sparkman Architects.
Okay.
I'll say that. Been with them for almost 10 years now. And a very interesting firm founded by Todd Sweet and Jerry Sparkman. And the practice is really built off of sort of the idea of building, adapting to the environment, building in a resilient manner. And I think we are one of the best at doing that in our region, where we truly care about how our structures, how our designs are going to withstand the test of time and the test of nature. And these recent storms have actually proven that what we're doing it works.
And as far as buildings that you have designed and they're up and running right now, what do we have on?
Yeah, I don't know if we have any images of this. This is something that
what is this?
So I would like to get. Well, why don't we go ahead and get into it since we're looking at it. So this is a memorial. This is probably one of the most important projects that I've worked on in my career. It is a memorial that sort of commemorates the Beirut barracks bombing, which was in 1983, there was a multinational military force that had moved into Beirut to sort of as a peacekeeping mission, because there was not only a civil war in Beirut, but it was a time when Israel and the PLO, Palestinian Liberation Organization, they were fighting, and the U.S. and other peacekeeping forces were brought in to sort of, hey, okay, let's keep the peace here. Everybody kind of separate, go back to where you started. And at that time, there was a barracks there that was housing Marines in 1983, and a terrorist. So this was kind of like the first terrorist act, is how they sort of describe it. Breached the perimeter of the barracks, went under the building and detonated what was the largest explosion experienced, the largest non-nuclear explosion, and it instantly killed 241 Marines, and one of the brothers of the fallen, he has started this organization to sort of keep people aware of what these peacekeepers were doing.
Mm-hmm.
And he's created an entire park in Charlotte County, and somehow we got connected to him to do a memorial. He wanted to do a tower, and we did a little competition in our office, and he ended up selecting my concept, which is what you see here. And really it is a sort of embodiment of symbolism, different aspects of the events.
It kind of reminds me to the general idea of Atlantis, no? With the 3 concentric rings at the bottom.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, so that is a terrace, which, now that I have to say, you've kind of reignited my curiosity of ancient architecture as you sort of invited me to go on this podcast. I hadn't really thought about it in a while.
I wanted to ask you, actually, because I've been curious about you going through your studies and becoming an architect. How much of ancient world architecture actually you get to study to become an architect? Like, how much did you study, for example, the Egyptians?
Not that much.
Wow, that's surprising to me, you know?
Not that much.
Like, I would look at that as one of the pillars for anybody who wants to become an architect, is just to study ancient Egypt,
Yeah, it's true. Yeah,
Okay.
and I think that's why you have to sort of have your own curiosities that go beyond what the programs of school can provide you. But, a lot of what we did study some of that. We studied a lot of Greek, Roman, and a lot of sort of city planning. In Italy, the city planning, the squares, piazzas. But yeah, there wasn't a ton of that. There are schools that do focus more on that. My particular school did not focus, but there are schools that really dig into it.
And as far as like some of the other projects that you have built here in Sarasota, I think that we have some photos of this one. This is the firefighter station, right?
Yes. So our firm we've done a lot of 40 fire stations over the time that the firm has been around. Starting with Todd Sweet, who is my mentor and one of the founding partners. So I've been working with him for 10 years now, and ever since I started, I've been doing a lot of fire stations, which are to me an amazing and gratifying type of work because they serve the community. They have an impact, and I like to think of them as, firefighters in our EMS. They're sort of modern day heroes in a way. They're not getting tons of money, it's doing what they're doing. They're putting themselves in situations where they're seeing people at their worst all the time. So this is one fire station that is in Largo, Florida, north of us, and a really interesting chief. Most of the time our clients are the the fire staff, which is interesting because in the way that we work is we're, and I was telling you this earlier, we're very good listeners. And you'll see that our style of art, there is no particular style of architecture. It really adapts to the needs of the client. We find the inspiration from that, the way that they speak of the spaces that they need, and that sort of evolves into the architecture. So you'll see most of our projects, none of them are the same unless they use them as prototypes where they want to repeat them, which they have done before.
Well, with 40 plus fire stations, that's a lot. So that's got to be the type of facility, the one that you have worked on the most,
Yes.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yep.
and this one is, for me, is beautiful. I love this style that is, once again, very kind of minimalistic but modern, and well, it's a fire station, so it's got to be highly functional, which it's always a big consideration in anything that I do. I wanna find that like balance between the beauty of aesthetics, but at the same time that those aesthetics are truly working in conjunction with the practical and functional meaning of why you are creating these structures, no?
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. And, I think that's really, to me, the best form of architecture really is that every move that you make has a purpose.
It's kind of like in martial arts,
Yeah.
isn't it?
It has a purpose. But what I love about that is that you never know, when you draw something on paper, it's one thing, right? But when it's actually built, that's kind of where the magic comes out, and the unintentional details that emerge, such as how the light is actually affecting the space, how the sound works within a space. Now, you can plan for these things, right? But there's always going to be little nuances that occur that you don't plan for. And that's where I think the beauty comes in. When there's the function,
Right.
but within that active function, there's a beauty that emerges. And it's similar with martial arts, right? There's the functional movement of whatever particular thing you're doing, but within that functional movement, there's beauty.
It's like what we talk about in the dojo regarding the martial art, that you have those two different like energies, right? You have the male and the female energy, or positive or negative, direct or circular energy. It's just basically the opposite energies. But when you think about in the martial art, what you're looking to create a balance between those two opposites. In one end, you need to have something that is functional, that you are utilizing for a specific purpose. But on the way to utilize that particular technique or structure, you also are more and more and more developing a sense of expression. And that's the artistic part. So you got to bring those two together in order to have that true martial art, which in essence, again, the martial coming from the military background looks not at the individual, but at the whole group. And the artistic part, it's now the individual that is looking for that self-expression. So it's almost like it's these two like complete opposite and seem like antagonistic, views that you have to learn how to mesh them together and at least understand when is the right time to be on the martial group setting and when is the right time for you to be on the individual artistic self-expression like setting, So once again, it's that balance. I find that architecture is such a discipline that we are constantly looking at in martial arts in the way that we structure our own body to perform the techniques, and then the way that we interact with another attacker, for example. And it's all based on geometry, on structure, on, laws of physics, So I find it fascinating just how much related the disciplines are, if you want to look at it that way.
Totally. And I think you made a good point about the individual and the collective, because, architecture, you'll see in the books, there's one name of one person, the architect, right? And maybe that's not reality. It's a collective effort, sometimes hundreds of people, right? It's, there's the visionary, the one that ends up putting, having their name on the work, but it takes a collective effort to design it, to think it up, and to actually build it. So it's just there's a lot of minds involved in architecture.
So you've been doing martial arts now for a little while too. So what will be your description in how your career, as far as like architecture and that particular discipline, how do you see that reflected on your own martial arts practice?
That's interesting. I think, that's an interesting one. I think that there's a certain approach that an architect takes when they're doing something that is probably a little more methodical, I guess. Probably not as much spontaneity in the way that I would practice my martial art. I think it's more sort of built up. It's a built up process. I think that from a physical perspective, I would assume that my understanding of physics has an effect on the way that I practice martial arts.
What about like the principles? Like have some of the principles that you have encountered in martial arts, do they resemble some of the same principles that you are constantly dealing with in architecture?
Totally. Yeah, I think Aikido is a great example of how to operate in an environment when you're producing architecture, because you can't fight. You don't want to fight a situation or a client or an idea. You have to sort of be able to harmonize with whatever it is that you're approaching. And I think that's probably, I think, the most effective way to think about it for me, is that you're sort of harmonizing, you're going with it as opposed to fighting against it.
Harmonization. And as far as like putting structures together like this, I think that we talked about it in some point in your today's practice as an architect. How much of into consideration is taken in comparison to, like, ancient cultures that when they design and build their structures, they place them in specific places, in specific directions, take into consideration the movement of the sun and the stars and so many other like variables. Like, what will be your take on that?
Yeah, I think architects have changed quite a bit over the years. Architect means master builder, which is kind of interesting. Like, you're a builder, right? A master builder. And I think even when they were building the pyramids, I don't know if they were even drawing things. They were actually out there with ropes, aligning things and, getting their hands dirty and kind of building it as it goes. But, with anything, things have become more and more complex. now architecture is so complex, the practice of it, because of all the bits and pieces and all the systems that we have now in place, and the expectations that humans have for comfort is just at an unreasonable. It's an unreasonable thing.
Okay, so here's the question for you.
Yeah.
Now that we're looking here at the Giza plateau, no, with the main 3 pyramids in the back. With your knowledge as an architect and your understanding of the technology that we have available today to build stuff, is it possible to recreate these structures today with what we have and what we know?
I've thought about this a lot, and I've had the privilege of visiting the pyramids, and sort of seeing firsthand the absolute magnitude of the the situation over there. It's just it's a human made mountain.
Correct.
Done so in a almost perfect manner, as is described. I don't think we have. I think personally we can. I think we can, from a pure sort of physical perspective. I don't think we have the will to do it now.
Well, this is one of the puzzles, no, about the whole thing of the Pyramid of Giza, especially. The old school belief, no, that they were tombs, which they never found a mummy in them. And then, as you know, since you were there, they don't seem to have any sort of like decorations inside. So when you look at these structures made out of limestone, they look like power plants to me. And a structure that has a specific purpose, but not of a religious or cultural meaning to me when I look at them. So I was doing some research on them over the years, and a few things they kind of call my attention. The first one is that these pyramids, they are built on an entire bedrock, which is an aqueduct. So meaning that the water from the Nile, the river, the Nile, it flows through the porous stone where the pyramids are sitting upon. And this stone is called the limestone, that has a characteristic that when water runs through it in a zigzag manner, apparently generates an electrical charge. So I found that really sort of like, okay, there is a real design that has to do with harnessing energy, just because of the magnitude. I mean, you're going through the effort to move those stones that are like tons, and we still don't know how they did it. But in my mind, this cannot be a tomb. It has to be a functional structure. That's why you went through the entire work of building something like this. Then when we look at the structure, then especially on the middle pyramid, the pyramid of Cheops, then we can see that there is a second layer that is being falling off over time. But that second layer was supposed to be a different type of limestone that covered the entire pyramid. And this stone, in contrast to the one that the pyramid is built, doesn't have the quality of basically channeling energy. So it's channeling electricity. So it kind of works as a sealer to the limestone that has the electrical charge.
Right.
So right in there, we're kind of looking at a gigantic like cable structure, that is fascinating to me. And then if we actually look inside and look at the shafts and the tunnels that they have, those are made out of granite.
Right.
And then right in there, you can see that they have like specific materials for a specific purpose. So I just find this like, it's just fascinating. It's...
Yeah, I mean, I think it's captivated people's imagination for so long. They're not sure how old they actually are.
Correct. Correct.
There's theories that the Nile River was a lot closer to it than it used to be, which makes sense to me. You know, why would they build something like this so far away from
Right.
from water? Just like any other city, if you're in an airplane looking down, you'll see the clusters of developments around the rivers, just because that's kind of where life stems.
And I think there's some like data from like satellite images that you can actually see how the river has been like migrating away from the pyramids
Right.
over time, and that makes absolute sense that those pyramids were right on the edge with that river
Yeah.
right next to it.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting theory too, that it's some sort of a power generating structure. I mean, there's a lot of different theories. There is the basic theory that it is a burial site. You know, in my mind, they didn't find any mummies in there, but this thing's been sitting there for thousands of years. At some point, somebody could have gone in there and pulled out, you know, if there was one mummy in there in the king's chamber,
Sure.
they could have taken it out.
But the thing about that is that even if we look at it in any other culture where we found these like sites that are burial like sites, there is always going to be some sort of like inscriptions around, just kind of like, you know, telling who was there and what, and apparently there is nothing of that kind inside of those structures.
Yeah.
Which makes it even more strange, you
Very
know.
mysterious.
Like there is, however, kind of like a rectangular box made out of granite that looks like perhaps it was a sarcophagus, but not necessarily. And there are many different theories regarding to what that was used for.
Right.
When I ponder about this particularly, say, okay, well, I do get a sense, I do get a feeling that it's a gigantic power plant, and it's channeling the electrical current, you know, from that river, and the entire limestone that is built upon. The question is, how was that energy used for?
Yeah,
Right?
right.
So,
Yeah.
what was the purpose? Was it
right.
some sort of kind of like wireless antenna? Like I know that Nikola Tesla, right? He built his Tesla tower in the U.S. and he was kind of like following the principles of getting the current of the water below to generate that electrical current that was going to somehow be used in a wireless manner. And now this is the other question for you. I don't know if you have studied it, but it also kind of puzzles me a little bit, is the Eiffel Tower in Paris. Because I was doing some research and just looking at that gigantic antenna too, which, okay, I understand that they wanted to present it to the world as some sort of like cultural symbolism, you know. But then when I'm doing the research on it, then it shows that they actually had 4 main platforms made out of limestone below the metal. So, and then you look at the position of the tower again, is right next to a river. So is there something here that is happening all over the place, that is that relationship between the water, the limestone, and then the structure that channels that energy somehow?
Yeah. That's interesting.
I'm sure somebody knows about this, but the one who knows is probably the one that is selling us a different type of technology right now.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, that's, you know, I have, you know, I got to go in 2006 when I did like a little Middle East tour with my father, mother-in-law, and my brothers. And, so we got to experience this. My father he's a fanatic when it comes to ancient Egyptians. I shared with you that when my father was younger, he there was a Tutankhamun exhibit in the New Orleans Museum of Art, and he would go every single day. He would go with a sketchbook, and he found this chest that he was enamored with, an Egyptian chest from Tutankhamun's collection. And he would go there with a sketchbook and draw every single detail of that chest, including all of the hieroglyphics, just by hand. He would sit there, and he couldn't touch it. He couldn't put a measuring tape, so it was all with his eyes. And then he built it. He built this thing, and it's I sent you the picture, but it's just the level of detail is just amazing. And that was our crib when we were young.
Okay, so you had the Tutankhamun crib.
It's kind of interesting that my father used to joke, or my mother, that they would put the cover on when we would cry. But
put the baby in the sarcophagus.
Yeah, exactly. So I got to go with my father, and he was just beyond himself. When I can clearly remember us going through the entrance that was made, going up the grand gallery, which was just a very strange feeling. It's at an angle, and you're sort of on your hands, and you're sort of crawling up this thing, and you're surrounded by these giant granite slabs that go up, 40 feet in the air of this gallery that's sort of stepped. And there was a very unsettling feeling about being in that place. And I remember looking over at my dad, and he was almost hyperventilating, just like overcome by whatever was going on there. And then we ended up going into the King's Chamber, which was another strange thing. And really, you can almost feel like the gravity of that mass above you. I
mean, look at the size.
I mean, it's just like. And the resonance in that King's Chamber was very strange.
And that's the other thing too, that I the more that I keep looking into this kind of stuff, like, I am absolutely convinced that they knew vibration technology, sound technology, like they were using all of that stuff back in the day. And I mean, some of the acoustics that you see on the ceilings, the way that they're built and the way the sound travels, I think that there is one of the chambers there that connects through a shaft into another big room that has this kind of acoustics and architectural structure for resonance. And I heard that some of the theories are that some sort of sound or vibration will be produced in that main room for that sound to travel through the shaft into the other room where that sarcophagus will be. And perhaps the patient or someone will lay in that rectangular granite box, and they will receive the vibration that is coming from the shaft from the other room. So once again, it's like I look at some of these theories, and you are looking at whatever is left behind, and it seems to me like a total functional structure. For what purpose exactly? That we still have to find out,
I don't know if we ever will. I don't know.
There is another one with the Sphinx. And this picture right here, I love this picture just because it's the F-16 flying over the pyramids. And what I love about this particular picture is it's kind of like traveling in time, It's like two different layers, two different time with the technology that we know of, and then the old technology that is being there for, who knows how long, right? Because that's the other thing. Some historians, they say that the pyramids are 5,000 years old, but I also heard other ones saying that, no, they go back even 30,000 years old. So it's one of those things that
Yep.
I guess we're still not ready to know the truth, huh? There was a recent apparently discovery of these like gigantic like tunnels that are like these like coils that go underneath the main pyramid, and they
Yeah.
go like 600 meters into the ground, and I don't know if that's
Miles.
completely like proven, but that alone sounds fascinating to me. And if that's true, there is no way that was a tomb. Like,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
if they got something like that underneath that structure that goes that deep into the earth, it definitely then it's some sort of like apparatus that is like, I mean,
Pulling
it's
some
it's just
energy
pulling
or
the energy
something,
right
yeah.
from the earth.
Yeah, I've seen that.
You've seen
I
that,
think,
right?
You know, I'm kind of at the camp that it's it's a fantasy.
Okay.
From the but who am I to say? I think it's from what I've read, some of the technology they're saying they use doesn't actually do that. Can't really penetrate that deep into the earth. There was a discovery. I don't know if it was like 2012 or something, but they use these things called muons, or I think that's what they're called. But they're particles, like high-speed particles that come from the sun, that can penetrate mass. And some scientists were able to sort of put panels or some kind of a receiving thing that would, as these particles go through, some of them that don't go through, or if they behave differently, they discovered basically a chamber above, like a chamber that they hadn't discovered before, above the king's chamber, maybe higher than that. That one I find a little bit more plausible. They're not allowed to dig. They're not going to let them dig. I thought that was interesting. But the latest theory, I just don't think we have anything that can measure.
Or can see
I
that
mean,
deep.
Yeah. I mean, maybe there is. But yeah, I don't know. That one, I think, let's wait and see what they come back with. You know, I think it's pretty fresh. That one, that discovery is still kind of
What about the Machu Picchu? Have you been to the Machu Picchu?
Yeah, I've
Right there.
yeah, I've had the privilege to go there. I actually went with my mother and my brother. My mother is she was a teacher her whole life, and then when she retired, she studied archaeology and started going on digs. And she went to a dig in Peru. Trujillo was the area. It's a coastal city.
Okay.
And she was doing a dig, and it was like a sacrificial site, and her and a couple other ladies were digging up bones of these sacrifices. And I remember going to visit her in her apartment, and there's 3 ladies staying there, and there's human remains on the kitchen table.
Wonderful.
Neatly organized,
Yeah.
So anyway, my brother and I went and met her, and then we traveled to Aguascalientes on the train, and then we took the walk to get to the to Machu Picchu.
Yeah, this is definitely it's just a magical place. Like when you realize how high you are for them to have built that up there, is it makes you again just wonder so many different things, how is this possible? And one of the things that I connect so strongly with all of these like ancient cultures around the world is the fact that they all built in stone. It's like that stone builder is something that really like lives for thousands and thousands of years after they're all gone, which it seems like in our, today's technological society, and maybe you can enlighten me on this particular item, but it feels to me like the materials and the type of constructions that we do today, they don't last very long.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. There's a lot of building for convenience as opposed to building for longevity. And it's just easier. It's cheaper, it's faster. You can build Yeah, steel structures, they'll last a long time, I think. But a lot of the materials that we use, I mean, we use concrete block a lot in Florida, which it'll last, but it's it's a man-made, it's not stone,
I read somewhere some long ago, that the concrete was an invention of the Romans. And one of the qualities of the concrete compared to the stone is that the stone remains energetically alive. So there is energy that goes through the stones, but the concrete has this quality to it that it shuts down all of that energy transfer. So meaning, if you are standing on a slab of cement, barefoot, you are actually not getting any energy from the earth. But if you are standing in one of those gigantic stones, barefoot, it's like you are connected to the earth's energy because there is nothing stopping it.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I found that very interesting as well.
One behavior that concrete does have, though, is that it's always curing. In other words, typical concrete, we measure it to 28 days, and that's when it's at its sort of full strength, design strength,
Okay.
whether it's 3,000 PSI or 5,000 PSI. But after that 28 days, it continues to cure indefinitely, so it becomes harder and harder over time, which is kind of an interesting thing to think about. So it's a different kind of energy that goes on, I guess. It's energy maybe contained within itself through that curing process.
So you can actually see like a noticeable difference from, I guess, the first concretes that were made and still are around, as far as like the structure, how it continues to condense.
Yeah. Now, the Roman concrete, I don't know how it was composed and whether it was like a very stable long-term thing. Obviously a lot of it's still there. But yeah, that's a good. That would be an interesting experiment to see.
This next question that I have is the one general question for everyone that comes to the podcast. And it has to do with your own understanding or beliefs of what this entire thing is or what we are. And what is it that you think that happens when we die?
I really hadn't thought about that. No, just, I've got, as the years pass, I come up with sort of different opinions on it. I don't believe that when we die that we cease to exist. I don't believe that. There's the thinking of it in kind of like a physics perspective, there's the law of conservation of energy that says that energy cannot be created or destroyed, only transformed, which is kind of an interesting way to sort of tie that into us as these entities of energy. I believe that we transform, whether that be a reincarnation or tied back to an energy source. I think that there are, when you look at the different world religions, they all kind of allude to very similar things, really. The Egyptians were obsessed with the afterlife, right there, believing that there's more to come as opposed to this carnal life. And that continues on into Christianity and all that in different forms. So I believe that in sort of an instinctual way. It's not in a way that I'm sort of latching on to a specific religion or anything.
Sure.
If I'm being honest with myself, that's instinctually what I believe. beyond that, there's sort of different versions of what that might look like.
That's
you know?
right. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah,
Yeah.
That's a very honest and fair answer. You know, there is some sort of continuation somehow. Yeah, it's a pleasure having you here, man.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Enjoyed the conversation.
Sure thing. It's good to learn a little bit more about you and what you do.
Thank you.